Hello, everyone. Is it audible? Yeah. Okay. So I think the topic is particularly like which areas to invest, and I think from a VC perspective. So I think before I begin, and I would really like all of you to feel free and ask as many questions. Um, and I think from the context, I have been an entrepreneur myself and part of 2 unicorns, and now have gotten into investments. So I think it is really like from the perspective of having been on both sides that I would really like want to also throw light on how VCs or investors look at startups when they want to take that decision. So please feel free to make it an interactive session. But let me open the session specifically on healthcare. So I think people would just think that some of the technologies that are going on, and especially because of COVID, there has been quite an increase in funding in healthcare. I mean, just alone in US, it was $40 billion investment in the healthcare companies, which is almost like double or triple since last year's. So, of course, the healthcare and COVID has made people realize how important is the sector itself. But as such, like when you come into the subsegments of healthcare, and it could be whether you are doing in terms of drug development or you are pharmacy delivery, or it could be remote patient care, it could be telemedicine in terms of diagnostic side. Actually, all of these technologies are hot. I cannot really say that, oh, these are like some of the important areas and some of them not. It is more comes down to what exact model do you have and what is the potential of the company. So, of course, these are all hot technologies, and depending upon that, some companies really do well in emerging markets, which lack the infrastructure or the health insurance, and some companies which are more in terms of innovation or patented technology more work better in the Western markets. But there is no one technology or one area that VCs would look at. It's more coming down from founders' perspective. So that is like for me as the opening, but would love to hear also your views.
Thank you. So healthcare as a sector has really evolved, like rightly said, especially post-COVID. But there are a couple of areas in the healthcare sector which need a lot of focus, and there is a huge opportunity that lies there, but those areas are untouched. So most of the platforms or most of the products that you see right now, or most of the startups that are working right now in this space are either focusing on preventive healthcare or on diagnose, and third is definitely the telemedicine part of it. Two areas which have huge potential and lacks a lot of interest would be first, which could be pre-stage of a health issue, which may also include something like preventive or say first respondent. Okay, that is one space, and the second space that I see a lot of potential is post-treatment care. These two spaces have huge potential right now, considering that 9 out of 10 startups that you see right now are offering something similar to each other. So post-treatment healthcare has huge potential, and actually technology can help those spaces very, very well, considering that the entire patient's real-time data is available, and what you need to do is just monitor and ensure that that care is taken properly post the treatment. The good thing about post treatment also is that it can also generate a lot of employment, considering that nursing and all these opportunities will open up in the market if post treatment is something which can be focused upon.
No, absolutely. These are some of the hotter areas. You know, you know, most of the companies and the startups really come across. I think I would also, bring a light that how health tech differs from when I consider other sectors like food delivery or e-commerce or AI or any of the other tech. I think one of the challenges with the health tech startups is sometimes they might really have a longer cycle in terms of MVP or product validation. And maybe it's a clinical drug, or maybe they need to kind of get regulated. If you compare on the data side, it could be HIPAA compliant. And some of these challenges, what other sectors wouldn't face, and that might really stall a startup. It also comes down from investors' point of view. So typically, if a startup comes across, what would I look as a VC? So I'm sure all of you must have heard all these typical that product market fit, competition, and all of that. But trust me, VCs take decision within the first 10 seconds of meeting an entrepreneur. And it is basically comes down people invest in people. So I think what we look for is basically three things. That number one, you have a huge market potential, whichever geography you are doing it. Number two, you understand, it's not about you are a good storyteller, but you basically understand the business model, the challenges, you can execute the company. You are good in operational excellence. And number three, it is really the founder's qualities. Because all of these great ideas that startups think that, wow, they have come up with some kind of innovation. But trust me, ideas and all of this is just 5%. 95% will be execution. So VCs would really evaluate you and ask you many questions in terms of projections and what would be your financial model. And they also know that at the end of the day, all these are numbers. No, neither they believe or they ever buy those numbers. But it is more to evaluate the founder at the end of the day, has he thought through? And that's basically the exercise we do. So it's important. It's not like, what you think as a great product or great tech it is, but how VCs actually, or you have to kind of come from a market point of view, why someone would actually come, whether it's a hospital or whether it's basically the pharmacies, whether it's the telemedicine, why would someone buy into your company, whether B2B or B2C? So you really have to kind of really do the exercise. But I think how you come across to the VCs and the confidence would matter much more.
Yeah, I think founder is definitely the person that you invest on. That is the first and the foremost thing that makes you decide whether that investment is going to go through or not. For me, the second thing that defines whether the investment is an opportunity is to understand if the team or the founder has actually identified the right problem. So more than the product or the solution, it's the problem if that has been identified properly. Because the problem will remain the same, the solutions will keep evolving. So as a product, it will keep evolving. You would see there were a lot of startups. So for example, something like food delivery. Food delivery, the challenge is you want to ensure that your food from a restaurant is delivered to your customers. That used to happen through traditional ways where the restaurants would have their own guys and you call a restaurant and the order would be fulfilled. Then comes the technology part of it where you could go to an app and then just simply order the food and somebody will come and deliver it for you. So the problem has always remained, the product as a service has always evolved. So that is something very, very important, that identifying the right problem, and if that has been done, then the opportunity is much greater and the chances of investments are much higher, because like I said, today your product needs to be modular in nature, and there should always be scope of innovating and improving the product as time comes by. And COVID has really shown that platforms like Zoom and a couple of other such platforms really uh, had high consumption. Also, when talking about the product or identifying the problem, eventually your consumer is your biggest investor end of the day. So if you have identified the right problem, it becomes a great opportunity for the investor and eventually for the customers to invest in the product through putting in money or buying the product and generating revenue for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing that I would just say that I've come across some of the startups who would put quite the extensive proposition that they're doing in terms of prescription management. It would be also in terms of data record. It would be pharmacy delivery. It would be telemedicine. Going on the bill management side, post and pre-operative care. So a lot of segments, and that would not be something appreciated by the VCs, because what they like is focus, and they like that you can take one problem, identify it, crack the solution end to end, establish the leadership, and then you're free to build the ecosystem. I mean, all of you guys know that Amazon solved one problem in e-commerce, and then you can build Amazon Prime or Whole Foods. So is Alibaba, the Ant Financial. All of these companies can be spillover effects, but you need to really go deeper into one vertical and crack that.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing that I want to mention here is that, there was a discussion here a couple of days ago in one of the sessions where we were talking about how funds have started to move into the startup by individual investors, and the growth of individual investors now investing in the startups. So from a VC perspective, as you mature as an investor, as you look at more and more pitch decks, or you do more and more investments, one thing that me and a couple of my friends who do investments have realized that people are now, or startups or founders are now talking more about technology. Okay, they are talking about AI, they are talking about machine learning, they are talking about integrating blockchain. End of the day, when we look at a product, it does not matter what technology you use. What matters is how good your product is. So there is a big difference between technology and product, and that is something that is very, very important, especially in something like healthcare. The first thing that you need to do is ensure that you have a right product. And how do you reach to that product? Whatever is the technology that you need to use, you use that, instead of making it fancy by using terms like AI, machine learning on everything and anything that is possible. We have to look at the actual utility of technology in that product. This also is very, very important in the healthcare sector, is because it's not a niche market. A product in healthcare will succeed if it has a wider target audience. It has target audience ranging from maybe 18 and going up to 65, 90, 80, whatever the age group is, or for multiple demographics, multiple target groups. So the better your product is, I think it makes it more lucrative for the investor to invest in, instead of being how fancy your technology is.
No, absolutely. I think one other thing that I would say that, of course, you would always think that VCs have the capital and maybe might really get disappointed because you see a lot of rejections and you not really understand what is that something you are lacking. And by some of the companies, maybe they don't have a better product or better tech, are really multiplying in valuation. And that could be very disheartening. But I think where you have to think through that, for VCs, it's not also, for them, it's also business. It's also the returns that they have to generate for their own investors. And they also understand that in the market, 80% of the startups fail, and maybe 50% they would really do their own math. And for them, no matter how maybe you have developed a very good tech product, but they will have to see that how executable it is, if this is going to be something a long term that's going to generate returns, or something that is operationally easier. And sometimes, like, each of these VCs have their own decision criteria. So my request would be that you shouldn't really take this path very seriously, because ultimately at the end of the day, not all VCs invest in all companies. So you have to also bring in some strategic people, even from the early stage, whether it's some angel investors, whether it's some kind of partnerships. You have to dress up the company. Sometimes, that just brings the weight and the leverage, and meet the right VCs, do a bit of research on them, what kind of companies have they invested, whether it's early stage or growth stage, what kind of sectors, and actually do a very customized approach, and not a very general approach to any of the investors. So that would be my another take.
Just one more point that I want to say is, people have been investing for a very long time. Okay, people have invested in companies. There have been investors. They have been investing through shares. It's a very similar concept, where they are investing through shares or they are investing into a company. End of the day, you are betting upon company's growth, and that's how you make money. However, a lot of investors who are in the share market, or how they think in a share market is, they have an exit strategy. They know they have stop loss, and they have various ways to understand how they can exit. If a startup, when pitching to an investor, is able to give the right picture of the exit strategy, I think that also adds a lot of value. If an investor
if someone sitting in Dubai today can take a course from India, or somebody sitting in India can take a course from US, and that all is possible through these kind of digital tools like learning management systems and virtual classrooms.
Sorry, what is that?
So a digital platform can be provided to one easily, but the key role for an educator or instructor is how well they can use a digital platform for better learning for the students or the learner. There are some key features in our virtual classroom that we breakout rooms, polls, media player, YouTube, annotations.
Sorry.
Something like you can upload any document, any format a document is in. You can upload, and the educator and the learner can learn together and can collaborate together. Whereas usually in some meeting tools you can't do that. You have to.
I have one question. So just to understand the venture capitalist psychology in this investing sector for the health tech, and because I come from a background where we do a lot of clinical trials, and which is cannot.
You need to be louder, please.
Be louder. Is it better now?
Be a bit louder.
Be a bit louder, please.
Front.
Yeah, please.
Just to understand the psychology of the VCs in making the decisions. Okay, so like if you have a proposals where you have a I'm talking from a point of investment in clinical trial segments, where we have a lot of decentralized clinical trials and other technologies coming in, wherein if somebody comes to you with some product which will help to increase the pace of the drug development. Like we say in general, it takes like 10 to 15 years for a drug to come in the market. And that person says, okay, if we use this thing to track and analyze the data and run the research, we can do it in 8 years. At the same time, there are other group of leaders in this industry who have worked in the different top-notch companies, want to come together and form a venture or form a company who will try to do the best, taking out the best out of each segment, but they don't have a product. but they have a people who are promising to do something down the line. So what's your thought process? VC will go with the product, what the previous first one have, or the idea where there is nothing but just people who can lead a company. Where would the weight goes more?
A very good question. And I'm not going to present the VCs in the nice light either. So it's true that I think in the last years, and you all would have realized that sometimes founders are chasing more valuation than the value game. And the art of storytelling becomes more prominent in terms of, raising funds than the actual product. Because it's also true that not all the VCs come from that experienced sector or ever have built any company. So they don't understand the pains, what it would require in terms of operations. And you would see, like any other market, there are good and bad founders. There are also good and bad VCs. So that is the number one, right? So I'm not denying it, that doesn't happen in the industry. But also the companies, for example, the clinical trial one, it's completely understandable that it's a process that's going to take a longer cycle. But the risk is high, but the returns are also super high, like any other dimension. So there are dedicated funds, and largely in partnership with global pharma companies, who would invest in terms of those clinical trials. And sometimes they like to do this outside their own ecosystem because they also understand that they are big elephants. They cannot really move the process so fast. So they like to partner up with some individual companies who are in terms of any of those drug innovation and clinical trials. But that is where you have to figure out who are the right people. On the other side, yes, those are some of the longer term VCs because they understand that I have to be patient for at least 8 to 10 years. And then once this is developed, there's a much more high return. There are other set of investors, let's say like super early stage, seed or Series A or pre-seed, who might not really care about what you really gonna do after 10 years. For them, it's an immediate that can we exit after 3 years, 4 years, and they are going to really look for you that can you then generate some revenue, some traction within these years, and do you have the capability in terms of raising another round, because that's their objective. So you will have to do your own homework on who are the right entities to approach, who are the right. In fact, I would also say that bring some of the ex-founders or people also in your board and advisory. That really helps to navigate those challenges and what to speak and whom to speak, where to channelize your energy and efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Just to answer your question, I think a really smart VC will bring them both together, and that will be an ideal scenario because both the things are very, very important, okay? Yeah. People who are already working in the domain and have a long experience will understand problems and also understands way around. On the other hand, if somebody has the right product, that is also equally important. However, if you have to pick between the two, it is very hard to say because it is not just about the product or the people. A lot of other things have to be considered while doing an investment. Yeah. So it has to be looked at as a whole package. Yes, there are criteria, there are checklists, but whichever of these will suit you more as an investor. Because you understand, when you say a VC already has a lot of investments. So for them, it becomes more of a strategic decision, what is going to help them to grow their existing ventures as well and align with their current line of investments. So that is the thing.
So in practical scenario, what would you advise as an experienced VC?
I can't hear you, sir.
In a practical scenario, what would you advise as an experienced VC for these second type of people, like who are coming together and want to form something? They should go ahead and form something and then go to VC? after performing for a, because of course they may not have the enough fund to show the larger picture to the VCs if they form also something. So, but if they don't get a VC after 1 year down the line, it's going to be a big risk for them, because if suppose they are at top positions in different competitor companies, and once they come out of them, those companies, it will be difficult for them to.
It's a very simple answer to it. If you don't trust and believe in yourself, then why do you expect a VC to do that? You are not ready to take a risk of that 1 year or 2 years of investing in what you really believe in, and then you are expecting a VC to put their money into your venture. That's very tricky actually, and that's not. I don't believe it's right. Until you come together, you give this thought a time for it to evolve, for it to become a business plan. You will need a lot of time, and I'm not saying just 3-4 hours a day. That's not how good startups are built. You need to devote 18-20 hours every single day. And as an individual, if you have 3 or 4 people who are representing different things and you are planning to come together, I think that should give you more confidence, because what you lack in as an individual, the other person will be able to cover for it. So you have to give it all in, otherwise it becomes very difficult to. I mean, you may be lucky enough to get somebody in that case, but I don't see.
So from a practical perspective for the funding, I think this particular sector always will have a challenge. So you need to bring in some of those angels. You need to bring in some of those partnerships. And you please understand that whether the scope of such a thing, clinical trial or drug, is region specific or it's global. Because I assume you're from India, so
I'm asking question from a global perspective.
Exactly.
Because that's the reason. Because forming something for a specific country is very easy or doable, but this segment is very highly competitive, highly regulated, and need a lot of technology evolution still. That's why there's a high scope. So somebody, if you want to go global from this region, like for example, for Asia Pacific region, for that matter, half of the Europe also, there are no companies who have grown global except companies from US. So that is the reason it's a high scope in this domain. But there was no group of people coming together. There was always somebody individual came out, started something, formed, got the capital investment, expanded to 1 or 2 countries, 3 countries, and sold out to a global player. That is the history from last 30 years or.
No, absolutely. And to go out like global, you will have to meet the right people and also raise funds. So you cannot really just go out of the region and cross-border expand. You would require strategic capital and partnerships.
Okay. Good, thank you. Maybe a lighter question from audience. Do you think the pressure from VCs making the startup culture toxic? Work culture, I mean, in the startup.
See, actually, because I've been a founder before, I think one of the things a founder constantly needs to is to draw the boundaries. Sometimes VCs can put the pressure in terms of the KPIs you need to achieve, whether they might really focus or pressurize you to build a top line while you want to kind of do more sustainable returns and unit economic side. So you have to sometimes draw a line because, of course, as an aligned interest, all of us want the company to succeed. It is about which way. And if this is an alignment, right, between the board, investors, and the founder, where you would absolutely can have some kind of autonomy, the way that you have the vision, but also not be, a complete blind, because some of the people have been there, done that, and they day in, day out look at the founders. So, of course, they also come with some kind of incredible experience. So you have to be realistic that, let's say you start a company with 100% ownership, but by the time you would become a $1 billion company, a founder might just end up owning 7 to 8% of equity. So it's not something that you have to really also evolve, that you're not going to be majority shareholder.
Yeah, and just one more thing, when you say about VCs putting pressure, it also has a lot to do with how. Hello? Hello? It also has to do with what commitment you have given to the VC. So if you, at the time of fundraising, you see a lot of startups just, over complimenting on everything that they're doing, and they're just, giving some numbers which they also understand and know that are not achievable. So you have to give them a right picture. You have to give them what is achievable. And I think that ways most of the VCs are very supportive also. I have personally felt that.
Any other questions or topic? Yeah, please.
First of all, I think you two are very insightful, and it's been a pleasure listening to you. You seem very, very experienced, and I was on your side as well. I was a founder, I was on your side. And then a few years ago, I went back to the founder side. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the, the part of the healthcare, which is actually the drug development. And I think this is a very small part of funding in this space. From my experience, it's about 5% of VCs are into drug development, and even those 5% include corporate VCs that are in the field, and they suffer from the not invented here syndrome, which you kind of mentioned. And as a founder of a company that is in the drug development space, I want to pick your brain and maybe get some insight or ideas from you on that. So we are focused on type 2 diabetes, developing a drug for that, and most people don't know, but the number of people suffering from type 2 diabetes is about 50% of the population now in the US. It's about 13% who actually have this disease, and another 38% maybe who are pre-diabetic. So it's about 50% of the population are either suffering from the disease or are going to suffer from it. So it's a very big problem globally, especially in the area we are at now in the Middle East. It's a very big problem in terms of percentages. And the other thing that is most unknown is that all the drugs on the market are not actually treatments for type 2 diabetes. They either treat the symptoms or the complications, that's it. And we have a drug that actually treats the core cause of type 2 diabetes, which is the insulin resistance. Now, we tried to raise money a few years ago, and eventually we raised about 1.2 million from actually a crowdfunding platform. After talking to a lot of investors, angels, and you mentioned it as well, you said people think it's 15 years, it's for their grandchildren, so they say forget it. And even if you convince them that in your specific case and in ours it is, for certain reasons, the regulatory cycle is let's say 3 to 5 years. Even if you convince them, they're not convinced. So eventually, VCs were not in the picture, and even the angel or the smaller VCs were not in the picture, and we raised the money, as I mentioned, from a crowdfunding platform. And now we have to raise again, let's say about $5 million, and I'm asking, what are your thoughts?
So I think you're quite spot on. I think I would try to answer it from a different aspect. So do realize that this industry is regulated, but in a way, this industry is also quite a mafia. So you have big pharma players, you have the diagnostic companies who have quite a hold in many markets and controls pricing, controls regulation. There's a lot of lobbying going on. So they all have their corporate R&D labs where they would develop the drugs. And for them, they want to kind of keep everything inside the ecosystem. So number one, right, it's something that you're not unique. Any of the founder in this space is going to find the challenge. Now, on the other side, are completely understandable from a VC perspective. the reason why you were able to raise from crowdfunding, because people bought into your idea. That's something that is really good for societies, some drug that can help in the insulin resistance and diabetes being one of the major problem, especially in emerging markets. But problem with the VCs, it is that, and it's not only the drug development, but also some of the blockchain. Do they fully understand themselves? Can they evaluate you fully? Do they have that kind of infrastructure or knowledge base to do the due diligence? And that's one of the challenges. They would say, like, maybe on your face that, yeah, okay, maybe this company, we would look at you a bit later, because for them, it's a complete blind spot. How can they really, like, evaluate you? So I think in that kind of a scenario, you have been lucky to raise crowdfunding. And as I said, like, at the early stage, you need to kind of bring in some strategic angels. But it's important that they not necessarily here, but there are some dedicated funds in US primarily and Europe that would look into such a thing. It might also build that once you have developed the patent or the product, you might have a leverage in terms of partnership with one of those corporate ventures. And last thing I would say, that leverage the government side. Because the government, let's say even here in Middle East, DHA, they have announced billions of dollars in funding for any of those health tech startups, anything that can help the ecosystem. So building those partnerships and leveraging that would be another take.
Everything I wanted to say, Mafia, lobbying, everything she said.
That's
exactly the case. One more very important thing is VCs and angel investors have a very different thought process. Yeah. So VCs have a lot of background checks and they understand the space very, very well. They have a research team which will do research. And one very important reason why something, the space that you are into has not succeeded in raising a lot of funds from VCs is because one very, very crucial thing if you are developing a drug is if you are able to get a patent on it. And because of this very strong lobbying and mafia structure that we have with the pharmaceutical companies, they will always figure out a way to go around it and, beat your product after understanding your product very well. So that fear is always there. And at a VC level, they also do not want to indulge in any legal cases or, any get into any of that kind of side of the whole trade. So angels definitely is something which will come across, you will come across who will invest. But for VCs, it becomes a very difficult thing unless they have a strategic investment in you. They already have a way out. Or also the thing is that from a perspective of making money on such investments, the only way that you will actually make good money is if you're able to get a licensing deal with one of these big companies, as she mentioned. Otherwise, going to market is very, very difficult. So that's the only, stop point for something like this.
Hello? Yeah, just to one comment. We do have patents actually granted, so that's not an obstacle. Of course, getting to the market eventually is, but our business model in the end is out-licensing the drug to a larger pharma company when the time is right. Usually that means after phase 2 clinical trials. So you need to be able to get and complete successfully the phase 2 clinical trial. So we're on the way.
Good luck.
Hi guys. A lot of us have had to take a deep, hard look at ourselves over the last 2 years, 3 years, and think about our organizations, start up new organizations, and really kind of build for the future. How have VC companies, what have they done to take a good, hard look at themselves over the last 2 years to adapt and become new organizations for the new world that we face now?
So, a very good question. It's true. I think a lot of new age companies are adapting new age tech. underlying tech could be deep learning, blockchain, and just a very open way of working, the no hierarchy, everyone is approachable, everyone is motivated. So it's true that the VCs don't have such a structure, but one of the reasons it is that no matter how much of, let's say, I can put the AI, right, in the VC side, and some of the VCs are trying to do it. You can put about market sizing, competition, all of these variables, right? And you can develop an algorithm, founders' capabilities, and you can come up with the AI score, and maybe you can have a predictive analysis whether this VC should be investing into this company or not. But in reality, it doesn't work, as I said, because people invest in people. So no matter you would present a lot of, and you would spend months in making your pitch deck and your financial model, but in the meeting, it just does act only as the anchor point for you to give a reference to what's your vision and what you want to convey. So it's because of that kind of a personal touch and be able to evaluate, because, as I said, the weightage in terms of founders and their execution capability is way too high, is so high. No matter how great the product is, but if you're not a capable founder, it means nothing. Equity at the end of the day is just a number on the piece of the paper. So in that part, it's difficult to replicate, in terms, but what people are doing, because until now, VCs was more of these older people, people who have created wealth, and then they would be part of the VC ecosystem. But what has started happening is that some new age people or younger people are joining the VCs because they are more connected towards what is happening in the millennials. Whether it's about Snapchat or any of those apps, because today, who are the millennials will be your users after 10 years, because that's the fun cycle. So you need to be close to understand what this younger generation likes, and they're doing it, versus what they have really known over their lifetime. So that is a change that is happening very, very fast, more in the developed market. But I agree with you, it's still a long way to go.
I have a different perspective to this. So one change that has happened in past few years is that the VCs have started taking decisions relying upon the data that is available. So it could be about the market size and whatnot, all sorts of data to understand the feasibility of the project. But also a lot of VCs have lost money since they have started to do that. So investment always should be by gut. You should have an understanding, and also I would give a weightage of 60% to that person that I'm interacting with, from he may be the founder or a representative, because end of the day, they have to run the business. So you would see a lot of people try to copy businesses which have succeeded drastically but have failed, because it is not about the business that you're running, it is more about how you are running it. So that personal touch or that personal understanding of that individual is very, very important. And I personally feel that is why the angels who are investing are making more money than VCs that are investing, okay? In a shorter run, definitely. In longer run, VCs will always end up making money, but you have to wait 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Individuals, angels, or individual wealth funds make money because of their decision making based upon that interaction that they're having with the entrepreneur.
Thank you very much. Mwirigi Kiula from Kenyatta University Teaching Referral Research Hospital in Nairobi, Kenya. Deputy Director, ICT and Innovation. As part of the hospital growth, we see innovation as a key plank. Now, we are beginning to see quite interesting innovations coming on board. But I also get the challenge that we should concentrate a lot more on the pre-treatment, post-treatment. Thank you very much for that. Now, on the issue of the VCs and the angel investors, I consider them to be a little bit more from outside of the organization. How would we unlock the potential within the staff on the institution that's rolling out or supporting the innovation mechanism? What models have worked out there in unlocking the potential? For example, staff in an organization investing in the innovations that are coming out of that organization or being supported by that organization. Maybe your comment, thank you.
If I understand your question right, you meant that how the innovation can be kept alive by the VCs and outside institutions in the companies?
No, how they can be kept alive by the internal customer, internal staff.
Internal management.
Yes, yes. The internal environment of the organization that is maybe supporting the innovation hub or the accelerator, something like that.
So, I mean, if you are a startup, I mean, innovation does not mean R&D or developing some really like tech. Innovation could be in terms of just the new way of doing things and new processes, new way of approaching any problem, and I think innovation really like is the bloodline of entrepreneurship. The reason why some of the big corporates are not able to innovate is because the innovation gets lost in the bureaucracy, in terms of decision making, in getting approvals and then executing it. While the new age companies have this agility in terms of fast decision making, fail fast but try. And this iterative approach, that's what really like they bump into the right solution. So for them, innovation is the backbone that keeps them alive. And you all have seen the examples of big companies like Nokia or BlackBerry. They just were overconfident in their technology and just thought that they have developed. But innovation is the constant way for a founder to keep up with the trend, what is happening in the market, and evolve accordingly. So as a founder, that is the DNA of your company. And two, for the outside, you all have seen that how the world is different, like just in few years, like pre-COVID or post-COVID. There's new way of doing things. Education has completely changed. So as a founder, you have to constantly innovate.
Hello? Yeah, I think just two things are important. As a founder, you need to communicate to your team what your vision is, and they need to align with your vision. That will always ensure that there is innovation happening. And second and more crucial thing is how much of freedom you have given to your employees or your team members. If you have given them freedom and if you have given them enough opportunity to fail, if you allow them to fail, then they will innovate and innovate more. That's the thing that at least we follow as a company.
Actually, I would give one example because I worked with Google before, and in Google, employees have to do their job for 80% of the time, but 20% of the time they can be associated with any research project, anything that interests them across the Google. And you would be surprised that most of the Google products, whether it's Google Earth or Google Maps and all these products have been developed out of that 20% allocation and not of that 80% what an employee was supposed to do. So this is a very good take that if you can develop those practices, also rotate your organization in multiple functions, so they're always energized, they become versatile, they learn more. You just really have to keep that spirit alive. I think we're done, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anvita and Chintan. Now, if you have more questions, we're going to be taking a lunch break soon, and you can definitely chase them and ask them whatever you like. Thank you so much. That was a very interesting discussion for sure.